Why does nothing bring you joy anymore? This question hangs in the air, unannounced, in one of those silent moments that sometimes invade our routine. You wake up, go to work, meet friends, live a day like any other, but something inside you doesn't seem to fit. It's as if everything is working well, but something is missing, as if the pleasure of small achievements is no longer the same. And you wonder, is this real life or just a repetition of days that no longer have the same sparkle? The feeling of dissatisfaction spreads, and with it comes emptiness. How many times have we achieved everything we wanted and yet still not felt that true joy? The new car, the dream house, the trips, the promotion at work, all those moments when we believed happiness was just around the corner. But upon reaching what seemed to be the key to a fulfilling life, we realize that this key unlocks nothing. The feeling of accomplishment quickly dissolves, and what remains is a distant echo of the promised happiness. Why, then, does nothing else seem capable of filling this void? The truth is, we often seek joy in the wrong place. We live in an era where we are taught from a young age that happiness lies in the things we can see, touch, and achieve. From the moment we are children, we are bombarded with the idea that having is the path to happiness. Society molds us to seek what is promised to us: status, fame, the approval of others. But what happens when we achieve all this? And yet, no matter how hard we try, the feeling of satisfaction eludes us. It's like a sip of water that is never enough to quench our thirst. The pleasure of achieving a goal soon disappears, and in its place arises the feeling that something is incomplete. But is that really what we want? Or have we been conditioned to want something that deep down has no power to fulfill us? And more importantly, if happiness isn't found in the things we can acquire, where then is it found? We are so used to this incessant search that we forget to ask, isn't true joy in the process, in the experience of living each moment, and not in arriving at a specific destination? It seems contradictory, doesn't it? Life teaches us that to be happy, we must achieve something greater, to grow, evolve, conquer more and more. And yet the more we have, the more we feel that something is missing. This paradox leads us to question everything. Why, despite having so much, do we still feel empty? The issue here is not what we have, but what truly fulfills us. We are chasing something that, in the end, may not even have the power to satisfy us in a lasting way. And what about those moments when happiness seems so distant? That instant when you realize you've lost the ability to find pleasure in the things that used to make you happy. There's no longer any enthusiasm for a good movie, for the company of friends, for a delicious meal. Each experience seems like just a repetition of something that no longer makes sense, as if life were passing you by while you watch yourself, motionless, waiting for something to awaken pleasure again. But what to do when that doesn't happen? When the feeling that nothing brings joy anymore becomes permanent? We are trapped in a vicious cycle that leads us to believe we need more to be more. We need more money, more recognition, more time, more achievements. The constant pursuit of the next goal, the next objective, keeps us busy but not satisfied. We think pleasure is always one step ahead, waiting for us to reach it, but when we finally touch it, it slips away like sand through our fingers. And so we go on, chasing something that never truly fulfills us. But what if the answer to this dissatisfaction lies not in the things we incessantly seek, but in how we relate to them? What if happiness is not a destination, but a way of being in the world, of surrendering to the present moment? This is the central question that Alan Watts poses to us. He challenges us to question everything we know about happiness. Are we looking in the right place? Isn't pleasure found in the experience of living, in the simple fact of being here and now, without the obsession of always achieving more? These questions aren't easy to answer, and more than that, there are no simple answers. But if we stop for a moment to reflect, we begin to realize that the search for pleasure and meaning doesn't have to be a desperate race. Perhaps the secret lies in accepting that there's nothing wrong with the emptiness we feel. This emptiness, in fact, is the key to something much deeper. If we can stop seeking pleasure where it isn't, we can finally allow it to come to us in a natural and peaceful way. True joy, perhaps, is not what we imagine. Perhaps it is not something to be achieved, but something to be allowed to be experienced. A subtle pleasure that does not depend on external achievements, but on our ability to be present and connect with what truly matters. And by ceasing to incessantly search for something outside ourselves, we may discover that happiness has always been within our reach, just waiting for us to finally recognize it. So what prevents us from experiencing this? Why do we insist on seeking fleeting pleasure when lasting pleasure can be found in the simple act of being? Now you might be wondering, how can we make this change? How can we leave behind the constant search for more and begin to live life in a fuller and more satisfying way? The answer lies in how we choose to look at our own lives. If we can abandon the expectation that we need something to be happy, perhaps then we can finally experience true joy. And what happens when we begin to live according to this new perspective? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: real pleasure begins the moment we stop searching for it. There comes a point in life when doubt begins to take shape. It's not a sudden doubt or a fleeting feeling, but something that slowly creeps into our being. What was clear at first begins to become hazy. That idea that we will be happy when we have something more, when we achieve something greater, begins to crumble. And then the question arises, what are we really looking for? For many people, between the ages of 40 and 60, this is a time for reflection. Life is no longer a linear path, full of promises of immediate success. On the contrary, it is a journey with ups and downs, full of choices and consequences, but also of rediscoveries. At this stage, it is common to question the path we have taken so far, what we have done, what we have failed to do, and what still lies ahead. Imagine, for example, Maria. She's in her 50s, with grown children and a well-established career. Over the years, she dedicated herself to work, to her family, and always followed the formula that seemed to work: strive, achieve, grow. However, recently, she began to question herself. What did she really feel after so many years of effort? When she looked in the mirror, she didn't just see a woman with a face marked by experience and time, but someone who, somehow, felt that the joys of life were slipping through her fingers. She has everything she should have: a comfortable home, financial stability, healthy children, and a career that is respected. But at the same time, a feeling of emptiness settles in, as if something were missing. Maria is not alone. Many, like her, are beginning to realize that the pursuit of external pleasure and happiness is no longer yielding the expected results. What once seemed like a race for happiness now feels like an endless marathon, where the promised prize never arrives. Alan Watts, in his philosophy, addresses this dilemma. He reminds us that we are constantly conditioned to believe that happiness resides in something outside of ourselves, in something we must conquer, be it a new job, the dream house, the dream trip, or the approval of others. But Watts proposes a twist. What if happiness wasn't out there, but within us? What if pleasure wasn't something to be achieved, but something to be experienced in the here and now? This reflection is not easy to accept, especially for those who have spent decades searching for something outside themselves to feel fulfilled. However, the key to this change lies in accepting that, throughout our lives, we have already experienced everything we need to find happiness. The simple fact of existing, of experiencing life in all its ups and downs, is already enough to bring us what we seek. It's not about achieving more, but about living more fully what we already have. Consider João, a 55-year-old man who, after a lifetime working in a profession that brought him no satisfaction, finally decided to leave everything behind to follow his passion, photography. He always wanted to capture the beauty of the world around him, but he was swallowed up by routine, social expectations, and responsibilities. Until one day, he realized that his life was being lived on autopilot. He was no longer connecting with what truly mattered. After this decision to change, Jerome didn't become a millionaire or famous, but he found an inner peace he never imagined. He began to see the beauty in small moments, like a child's smile, the morning glow over the sea, spontaneous laughter with friends. He didn't need anything else to be happy. Everything was right there all around him. What Alan Watts teaches us is precisely this. Pleasure and meaning are not found in the relentless pursuit of more, but in accepting what we already have. It's not about chasing the future or clinging to the past, but about fully living in the present. The future will always be uncertain, and the past cannot be changed, but the present is the only moment we can truly live and experience. You don't need to be a philosopher or an expert to understand the impact of this perspective on people's lives. Over the years, we've seen many examples of people who, by seeking happiness in the wrong place, lose themselves. But there are also those who, by changing their focus, find unexpected peace. They are no longer looking for external validation. They are no longer comparing themselves to others. They are living for themselves, according to their own truth. Let's return to Maria's story. Reflecting on her choices, she realized she was living a life largely shaped by the expectations of others. She wanted to please, to be accepted, to achieve the goals imposed on her by society, family, and work. But when she realized this, an immense weight was lifted from her shoulders. She began to embrace what was important to her. She began to look inward and discover what truly made her feel alive. The change wasn't radical, but it was profound. She began to practice gratitude, to connect with the people she loved, to dedicate more time to herself, to do the things that made her smile, not because she needed to achieve something, but because she was already content with who she was. These examples may seem simple, but they are powerful. They show how life can be transformed when we begin to question the way we relate to the world. We don't need a major turning point or external change to find meaning. Change often lies within ourselves. And by looking inward, by recognizing who we truly are, we begin to understand that we already have everything we need to live a full and joyful life. If you find yourself at a stage in life where you're starting to question everything you've done so far, know that this reflection is not a sign of failure. It's an opportunity for transformation. As Alan Watts teaches us, there's nothing wrong with questioning our choices and beliefs. On the contrary, it's an invitation to true freedom. Freedom to be who we really are, without external expectations, without societal pressures, and most importantly, without the burden of always having to be more to be happy. True joy doesn't come from what we can achieve, but from how we allow ourselves to experience it in the present moment. And that's a gift we can all begin to give ourselves right now. How many times have you found yourself waiting for something to change so that happiness could finally arrive? The constant expectation that something is coming, something that will transform everything, has the power to create an invisible trap. We are always waiting for the next big moment, the one that will make everything worthwhile. A promotion at work, recognition of an effort, a new phase of life that promises lasting satisfaction. But however hard we try, these arrival moments never bring us the complete pleasure we imagine. And then we ask ourselves, how long will we continue waiting? What keeps us trapped in expectation is, paradoxically, the promise that something greater will happen in the future. We live in a constant state of almost there, as if happiness were always ahead of us, but never fully attainable. This expectation prevents us from being fully present because, while we are waiting for what is to come, We fail to live what is already here. And how much time do we spend like this? Years, decades, waiting for something that doesn't always materialize in the way we imagine. This is the case of Roberto, a 48-year-old man who lived much of his life believing that great professional success would be the key to his happiness. He sacrificed for years, seeking recognition, working tirelessly to climb the career ladder. But upon finally achieving his dream job, he realized that the joy he imagined was not there. The work was exhausting, the challenges were new, but the feeling of fulfillment was still distant. The expectation that this position would make him happy did not materialize, and the question he asked himself was, why, if I have achieved everything I wanted, do I still feel that something is missing? Roberto found himself trapped in the cycle of expectation, where the pleasure of achieving dissipated as quickly as it arrived. This phenomenon isn't unique to Roberto. We all go through it at some point in our lives. We're so used to waiting for the next goal, the next prize, the next validation, that we forget to look around us. Promises of future happiness become a kind of emotional crutch. They make us believe we're doing the right thing, that we're on the right path. But deep down, they distance us from the real experience of life. And the great irony is that in waiting for future happiness, we end up missing out on the joy of the present. Expectation becomes our prison. But what happens when we begin to abandon this constant waiting? What happens when we stop believing that happiness is only available when something big happens? The answer lies not in giving up on our ambitions or goals, but in reconfiguring our perception of what truly brings us pleasure. What if pleasure, instead of being something to be achieved, is something to be lived in the present moment, in every small action, in every gesture, in every breath? Alan Watts proposed something revolutionary about this. He challenged the idea that pleasure lies in a distant future, waiting for a series of conditions to be met. Instead, he taught us that pleasure is in every moment we live. This may seem too simple for many, but it is precisely this simplicity that often eludes us. We are so caught up in the expectations that something bigger will come, that we fail to perceive the beauty of small daily victories. Joy is not in the grand event we await, but in how we choose to look at life as it unfolds. But how do we change this perspective? How do we break free from this constant waiting and begin to enjoy the present moment? The first answer lies in accepting that, most of the time, the pursuit of happiness in the future is an escape. We flee from the complexities and challenges of the present, believing that we will only be happy when conditions change. However, in doing so, we distance ourselves from the true essence of life. The present is the only moment over which we have control, and it is in the present that the key to satisfaction lies. It's necessary to pause and reflect. How much time have you spent waiting for something that, when it finally arrived, didn't bring the promised joy? It's not wrong to want more from life, but it is wrong to believe that we will only achieve true happiness when we conquer more than we already have. What would make the difference then? The difference lies in how we relate to what we already have and to who we already are. When we stop seeing happiness as a finish line and start seeing it as something we can experience in the present moment, things begin to change. I know it's not easy. We're conditioned to think that the future will bring us the fulfillment of everything we desire. It's a process deeply rooted in our culture and our way of thinking. However, when we look inside ourselves, we can realize that the simplest, most everyday things are what truly bring us satisfaction. The smell of coffee in the morning, a conversation with a friend, the smile of a loved one, the simple pleasure of being present. That's what really matters. Ask yourself, why does the expectation of happiness in the future always seem to recede further? Aren't we living an illusion? By focusing so much on what's to come, are we neglecting the pleasure that life offers at every step? Instead of waiting for tomorrow, How about embracing the present, with all it offers, even in its imperfections? That's where Alan Watts comes in, with his philosophy of being in the moment, of living without the obsession of a distant future, but with the full awareness that the here and now are the only moments that truly matter. Let go of the pressure for more, the incessant desire for life to be something you will still achieve. Instead, begin to surrender to the experience of what is simple, of what is immediate. When you start living this way, you realize that expectation dissolves and happiness is no longer in a distant place. It's already here, by your side. What can you do to start experiencing this in your life right now? It's not a change that happens overnight, but it's a journey that begins with a simple step: being present. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, or what's to come. The joy of living is found precisely in the now, where you are. And when you truly accept this, you begin to see happiness unfolding in ways that weren't possible before. That's how change begins, without rushing, but with the certainty that change is already underway. When was the last time you simply allowed yourself to be without haste, without the constant urge to do, to achieve, to accomplish? It's curious how, throughout the decades of our lives, we've learned to associate happiness with action, with conquest. Life often seems like a race towards an uncertain future, where all good things await us, if we have the time and energy to reach them. But what would happen if we said for a moment, enough? What if the secret to true fulfillment wasn't conquering more, but simply stopping and living what is already before us? It is in the now that everything happens. The present is the only moment in which we have real power. And yet we spend so much time caught up in worries about the past or the future that we forget to live in the only time that truly exists, the present. In 2025, it seems almost obvious to talk about how consumed we are by haste. However, statistics on mental health, rates of depression and anxiety show that we are more disconnected than ever from our own essence. According to the World Health Organization, more than 300 million people around the world live with depression, and much of this depression is rooted in constant dissatisfaction with the present and fear of the future. We are searching for something, but we don't quite know what. We are running, but where are we going? Let's imagine the story of Laura, a 45-year-old woman, mother of 2 teenagers, and with a successful career. For years, she lived her life on autopilot, following the flow of societal, work, and family expectations. Her day was a succession of commitments, meetings, deadlines, household chores, childcare. When Laura looked back, she felt she had fulfilled all the roles imposed on her. But at the same time, she wondered, why don't I feel fulfilled? Even with everything she had achieved, something was still missing. The answer came one Sunday afternoon when she was alone at home after her children had gone out with friends. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing to do. She sat on the sofa, looking out the window, observing the city's movement without haste. And in that moment of quiet, an unexpected feeling of peace overcame her. It wasn't the feeling of having achieved something grand, but of simply being, of existing in the space and time she was in. Laura had never realized how absent she was from her own life. She spent her days rushing around, not out of necessity, but out of compulsion. The pressure to be perfect, to meet expectations, made her lose touch with the present moment. It was only when she allowed herself to stop that she realized what was truly missing: her ability to be present with herself. This concept of being present is something that Alan Watts addresses with such depth. He speaks to us about the power of simply being, without the need to always seek something outside of ourselves. He challenges us to abandon the idea that happiness lies somewhere distant on our journey, and to realize that it is already around us, available in the simple act of living. Watts talks about the connection between being and doing. There is no need to separate ourselves from our daily actions, but rather to engage with them fully, without expectations, without haste. And that is what makes all the difference. When we surrender to the present moment without judgment or comparison, we experience a new form of pleasure, more authentic and profound. Imagine, for example, the daily life of Marcos, a 52-year-old man who spent much of his life believing that happiness was linked to external achievements. He believed that fulfillment came with professional success, with the recognition of others, with building an admired self-image. For years, Marcos chased after this, without realizing that the price he paid was his own inner peace. Until one day, at a spiritual retreat, he was challenged to practice meditation, to breathe deeply, and to focus on the present moment. At first, Marcos struggled. He was so used to projecting himself into the future, to living for what he still needed to achieve, that finding peace in the now seemed impossible. However, over time, he began to notice something surprising. The more he surrendered to the present moment, the more he felt a calmness that didn't depend on what was happening around him. It was a feeling of inner fullness, something he had never experienced in all his pursuit of more. This was Marcos's great lesson. It's not the achievement of the future that brings satisfaction, but the ability to fully live in the present. He began to understand that by being truly present, he wasn't just slowing down time, but deepening his life experience. Each moment, however simple, became more meaningful. Every conversation with a friend, every meal with his family, every step he took while walking down the street, all of this took on a new meaning. This transformation isn't unique to Marcos or Laura. It's within reach of all of us. If we choose to live more consciously, more attentive to what's happening now, instead of getting lost in the relentless pursuit of more. Being present doesn't mean abandoning our goals, our responsibilities, or our desires. It means rather living in a way that's more aligned with what's real, with what's right in front of us at this very moment. Our generation, in particular, has been shaped by a vision of success tied to achievement and accumulation. We grew up with the idea that to be happy, we need to have more, be more, achieve more. And yet, when we achieve what we wanted, we often discover that pleasure doesn't come from having, but from living. By practicing the present, we take a step towards emotional freedom. We are no longer trapped in a future that never arrives, nor in a past we cannot change. We are free to be who we are, in the exact moment we are in. When we turn our attention to the present, we see that we don't need a perfect life to be happy. Happiness is already in daily experience. The fact that we are alive, that we can breathe, that we can observe the world around us, that is already enough. It may not be easy to understand and accept this immediately, but with practice, with presence, we begin to realize that life is not something to be conquered. Life is something to be lived. How many times have you gotten lost in your own thoughts about the future while the present moment slipped through your fingers? By making the decision to live in the present, you begin to rediscover what truly matters. The simple act of being present, of experiencing life without haste, becomes a profoundly transformative experience. There's no need to search outside for what's already within you. The power of now is the greatest gift we can give ourselves. We've reached the end of a journey that may have made you look at your life in a different way. Perhaps you've questioned your choices, the way you've been living, and especially the relentless pursuit of something that you often don't even know if it's what you really need. Life, as Alan Watts teaches us, is not a destination, but a journey. A journey often made up of small daily choices, of simple but profound moments. True transformation doesn't happen when you achieve something big and distant, but when you begin to live your life in a more conscious, fuller, more present way. But how do you do that? How do you transform these reflections into something real that you can apply to your daily life? How do you start changing now, even if it's with small steps, to live in a freer, lighter, more authentic way? The answer lies in your ability to reconnect with yourself and with the present moment. It lies in learning to value what is already around you, in the here and now, instead of always seeking more, always moving forward. First, believe in your power to transform. You, who have already lived through so many experiences and faced so many challenges throughout your life, possess immense strength within you to change your reality. It doesn't matter how old you are, no matter how many years of searching, rushing, and accumulating have passed. Each day is an opportunity to start over. It's not too late for you to take the first steps towards a fuller, more balanced life, more in tune with what truly matters. Start with the simplest thing. Stop. That's right. Stop. As counterintuitive as it may seem, stopping is the first step towards a new beginning. In the chaos of daily life between commitments, responsibilities, and expectations, it's easy to get lost. But by stopping, by giving yourself space to breathe, you begin to reconnect with your essence. This can be done in various ways, with a simple pause in the middle of your day to breathe deeply, to observe the world around you without the rush to go anywhere. This can be done with 10 minutes of reflection, meditation, or simply in silence, where you allow yourself to be present. The second thing is to cultivate gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most powerful practices we can adopt to transform our way of seeing the world. By focusing on what we have instead of what we lack, we begin to see the abundance in our lives. This doesn't mean ignoring challenges or difficulties, but rather choosing not to get stuck on them. Look around you now and notice what good things you have. A home, a friendship, health, the opportunity to change. It doesn't matter how big these things are, but the meaning they have for you. By cultivating gratitude, you begin to realize that happiness is not in achieving something greater, but in valuing what is already present. The third practical action is to establish small goals for connecting with yourself. This means making your mental and emotional health a priority. If you feel overwhelmed, it's time to take time to care for yourself, whether by doing an activity that relaxes you or dedicating yourself to something that brings you pleasure, such as a hobby or a passion you've been putting off for too long. Simply allowing yourself these moments of self-knowledge and self-care is already a big step towards transforming your reality. These small actions, if performed consistently, have the power to reprogram your mind and your energy. Now think about what you've been putting off. Perhaps you've set aside a dream, a passion, or even a desire for a life change. What's in your heart, waiting to be recognized and experienced? Change doesn't have to be radical or immediate, but it can begin with the decision to take the first step, however small. If you dream of traveling, studying, changing careers, writing a book, or learning something new, why not start now? The simple act of taking that first step already begins to transform your vision of yourself and what is possible. Here's the secret. Change happens when you begin to allow yourself to be lighter, more authentic, more connected to what truly matters. And that doesn't mean you have to abandon your routine, your job, your family. It simply means that you start putting what's most important to you at the center of your life, in a balanced and healthy way. It means stopping chasing something that's always in the future and starting to live fully in the present. It means giving yourself permission to be happy now without needing to wait for everything to be perfect. Now, imagine what your life would be like if, starting today, you made a different choice. If you began to live with more presence, more attention to what truly matters, and more gratitude for what you already have, imagine the impact this would have not only on your own life, but on the people around you. When you change, you begin to change the world around you, silently but powerfully. And if you've made it this far, you know that the journey doesn't end with these words. It only begins. And most importantly, you're not alone on this journey. There are many of us all seeking the same thing: peace, freedom, well-being. And together we can build a community that supports each other, that shares its experiences, that grows and learns together. So, I invite you to be part of this journey. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and most importantly, share your experiences and questions in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say, how you've been dealing with these challenges, and how we can together transform our lives from the inside out. There's no shame in being vulnerable, in admitting that we too are seeking something greater. Here, we create a safe space for everyone who is willing to change, to grow, and to live a fuller life. Remember, the transformation starts now, and you have all the power to begin this journey. I will be here, ready to support you and walk alongside you. Let's go together, step by step, to live a life of more freedom, more energy, and more well-being.